None other than Mr. Nikhil Sahni, Division President, South Asia and Country Corporate Office, India, Mastercard, on creating an inclusive financial world that is global, growth-oriented and secure. So first up, all the ones who are seated here, can we have a huge round of applause? Thank you so much for that energy, and let's gather some more insights from none other than Mr. Nikhil Sahni.
Thank you. It's on, okay. Thank you so much for all of you who decided to stay back. It's great to, kind of be here. And of course, talk about a topic which is, I guess, very, very close to the way we work in this entire setup today, which is about inclusion. It's about an inclusive growth, which is about how exactly can we take India to the next level. And I think there was a fantastic session with the Honorable Minister just now, which has given some sort of a cue to us on what exactly is it that we need to do. So maybe getting a little bit back to basics, first and foremost, the Honorable Prime Minister yesterday, in his opening remark, talked about Amrit Kal, which is the next 25 years, which there is an expectation that there will be a complete transformation in the way India behaves. And just seeing a few cues from the newspapers that at least I pick up today. So very, very interestingly, the International Finance Corporation Managing Director, Global Managing Director, was quoted in the papers today saying that they want to increase their lending to India, and they want to double their lending to India from about a $1 billion level to about $3 billion, or rather it's a 1.3 to a 3 billion over the next couple of years, which effectively tells you that if the largest institution that does private sector lending from a World Bank standpoint is that interested in India, something must be right. Of course, the fact that we are now the fifth largest economy, or rather fifth largest economy in the world, is also something to be very proud of. So from a digital payments perspective, obviously Mastercard payment index indicates that in the last 1 year, 90% consumers have done one digital transaction. Digital is on the move. Of course, numbers from a UPI perspective in India are staggering. And I think something that has truly been created in India is something that all of us have to be proud of. But I think the fact of the matter is that through regular communication, and I think there is a trust factor that we need to still develop in the ecosystem. So I think what UPI has done over the past many years, as I said, it's great. But the fact of the matter is it's about building more trust into the ecosystem. And the trust, if you look at, okay, I'm not showing two circles on the logo of the company that I represent, but this is what the whole world used to know as trust in India, which was the SBI logo. I'm just trying to make it very simply. And building that trust from a State Bank of India perspective took years. Today, our ecosystems are growing so fast, and that trust is something that all of us together with initiatives the government is taking, such as Digital India, Genesis, Digital India Bhashini, will be initiatives which take us to the next level. Of course, we have run, so we are basically moving from maybe digital inclusion, I would possibly say from digital inclusion to inclusive growth, or possibly in some pockets it's moving towards digital well-being. And a classic example of digital well-being for India at large is that India ran the largest COVID vaccination program in the world, which was completely digital. I know of people who visited us from the US, where it was a completely paper system in terms of recording their vaccination. So I think India is moving very strongly towards digital well-being, but what are the next major steps that India needs to take to really ensure this inclusive growth as well as financial well-being or digital well-being? I think the steps are two. I was just now with the RBI Innovation Hub CEO, Mr. Rajesh Bansal. There is for those who are not aware, there is a digitization of the entire Kisan credit card, which has happened in partnership that they've done with two banks, which allows a loan to be disbursed to a farmer in 5 minutes. That's the sort of work that is happening, and that is the innovation that all of us have to look at, creating such competitive business models which are actually commercially viable, and that is something that RBIH has shown can be done. So I said, in terms of inclusive growth, the two sectors which possibly drive the economy and are bigger than anything else are the MSME and the agri sectors. The agri sector, there is a fair amount of work, but going back to MSMEs, the biggest problem to solve for the MSMEs, whilst there's been work on the digitization side which has got them onto platforms, the biggest issue with the MSMEs is it's a fairly well-researched topic, a $400 billion gap. These numbers might be a little, $400 billion credit gap. These numbers might be a little dated because the pace with which Indian MSMEs are growing, this number might have become 450 million by, for all that you may know. We address 25% of this gap. We have studies from Mastercard's Economics Institute which prove that a 25% addressal of this credit gap can add about 1.9 to 2.6% of growth in nominal terms to the GDP. So just trying to give a sense of what is the scale that one can achieve and how does this happen? Of course, there are initiatives that the government is taking through OCAN, the account aggregator model. But the fact of the matter is this has to be predicated through supply chain led credit models, which is where we pick up corporate anchors who would want their entire supply chain to be funded. There are corporate anchors in this country who spend zillions on keeping their entire supply chain happy. But the fact of the matter is that there is obviously propensity to be able to invest, to be able to get these MSMEs the kind of credit that they need and not having to depend on NBFCs which charge them crazy sorts of interest rates when it comes to MSME. So I think supply chain led financing is the answer, but there is a whole lot of work that will need to happen from all of us combined together. Now, for example, the open network for digital commerce that is coming up, and the Honorable Prime Minister earlier last week announced, or rather earlier this week announced the National Logistics Policy, which again will give an impetus to fintechs to see how these supply chains, what problems in these supply chains could be solved through the interventions that are coming from a policy standpoint. So I think that's like one of the most critical parameters for us to be looking at. Some of these policies, they'll come in, there are opportunities. For example, ONDC will democratize retail commerce completely. Retail e-commerce will be completely democratized. The concept of scale or access to scale will possibly not be a thing of the past. It will never. So you will get a level playing field. And of course, then you get access to transactional data. And there was a report that Niti Aayog did on connected commerce where they called out that AI, ML, as well as basic transactional data can be utilized for adding value to the credit on the MSME side. So I think credit to MSMEs is possibly the first aspect, as I mentioned. But as I said, fintechs will need to create solutions which are commercially viable. So Travis Kalanick, if I remember, when the Honorable Prime Minister had introduced the Startup Mission in January of 2016, Travis was speaking at that forum and he had said they try and solve a problem which is as complicated. So the more complicated a problem you solve, the more commercially viable it will be. So potentially we'll have to look at these aspects of the entire ecosystem which makes sense for everyone to, therefore invest and contribute. I think the other aspect with the proliferation of digital growth that has happened in India, and not just in India, it's happened across the globe. I think one of the other things is, as I mentioned, that as an ecosystem, we need to do a whole lot to build trust in the ecosystem. And when I say building trust in the ecosystem, it is about a very, very significant risk which is looming in our, as far as all of us are concerned, which is the cyber risk. So I'll maybe take an example. When we look at cyber risk, we possibly only think from a consumer's perspective. The Honorable Minister was also alluding to, a lot of stuff that is happening on the consumer side, but maybe on the enterprise and MSME side, there is much more that fintechs need to do. I'll give you an example. May 6, 2021, there is this company called Colonial Pipeline, which was hacked, which is actually the company that imparts, fuel from the western side of the US to New York. And there was a shortage of fuel supply in New York for about 5-6 days. And the government had to pay hackers 75 bitcoins or about $4.5 million to get the hack out. Fundamentally, what I'm essentially trying to say is that today, this risk is not only pertaining to organizations that are only in the digital space. Everyone is in the digital space. So if you're a manufacturing organization that is in the digital space, you are going to be a part of this entire cyber risk piece. So the Colonial Pipeline is only an example. There are many others in India. In fact, there is a cyber attack that happens across the world every 11 seconds. So that's the sort of proliferation of cyber risk that has come into India. The government is doing its bit in terms of creating a national cybersecurity strategy, which is going to be launched. It's going to be a 5-year plan. It's in the making for some time. It will be announced. India is also creating a, I think, malware repository where there is more work that is happening on the cyber side. But I think as an ecosystem, we need to realize the importance of cyber risk. And cyber risk, as I said, is about enterprise. So which is where from a policy standpoint also, we have to push the entire ecosystem to invest in cyber risk or invest in products and services that prevent cyber attacks. I think that is something from a policy standpoint that needs to now happen, because that is when people will start to understand. So it's like, if you are an enterprise which is in a regular business and you get hacked, that cyber risk is actually a problem onto your bottom line, because it will disrupt your business model in as significant a manner that you can think of. So to that extent, cyber to me is possibly one of the biggest, and the regulator's intervention on the cyber side, if you look at it from a consumer perspective, has been fantastic on the tokenization drive that many of us, put together in this room are trying to put together and take forward. So, which is where, I think the entire piece on maybe MSMEs at one side and cyber risk on the other side are initiatives that fintechs could possibly look at, given the fact that these are very, very solid areas where, you'll get to your unicorn status also in course of time. When I used to be a kid, I used to think it was only a mythical character, but that's how dramatically times have changed. So you want to only talk about such stuff. But the fact of the matter is that if there is a specific problem that you can solve on these two sides, and MSME too, if it's a $450 billion gap, and if we can somehow solve for it, so from a digitization perspective, we've got MSMEs into the net. So I think in summary, what I'd say is that if India has to truly move to an inclusive setup which truly is financially included, digitally included, I think the next wave from our side has to come on the MSME credit side, on the agri side, and of course on the cyber risk side. I think that is what will take us into the next 25 years as a country which will possibly be noted and noticed across for having done initiatives like UPI, for example, and many others like ONDC. I hope ONDC is actually a first. When you discuss initiatives such as ONDC with people across the globe, they actually believe that there's nothing of this sort that has ever happened. So democratizing this has been a fantastic, I think, initiative. And we look forward to seeing how we can, make a deeper impact on all of this. Thank you so much for your time.